Welcome to Hawaii Matters, a Pacific Media Group community program. I'm your host, Kathy with a K. Our guest is Dane Lam, conductor, musical, and artistic director with the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra. Conductor Dane Lam, how does the world address you in the world of symphonic orchestras?
It's a good question, Kathy. Some people, the traditional term for conductor comes from the Italian maestro. And I get called that sometimes, but I do generally insist that people just call me Dane. I think the days of these grey-haired conductors, this kind of tyrannical rule over the orchestra, those days are gone. People generally play better when they feel comfortable, when we're all going towards a certain goal. So Dane is fine.
Okay. I will call you Dane. Dane, where were you before arriving at the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra?
I've been a lot of places. Immediately prior to coming here to Hawaii, I was actually in my hometown of Brisbane, which was a little detour in my life. I left home in 2007 and moved to New York, and then Manchester in the UK, and then London with a few stints in Scotland and China. I had an orchestra in China. But then, of course, this little thing happened in 2020 when the world all shut down, and my then girlfriend and I, now wife, we were sitting in our little London apartment. She's an opera singer, I'm a conductor. Of course, all performances had stopped. And so we were thinking, what are we doing? We're paying London rent, not earning any London income. My Aussie agent called me up. He said, mate, come home. Everything is good here. And of course, Australia, being an island like Hawaii, could basically shut its borders, and life was more or less normal. As early as August 2020, there were full-scale orchestral, operatic performances, and the very best thing for me was that no foreign conductors could come in. So I could do everything. I did everything, and that sort of brought me to the attention of the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra, who at that time was searching for their first music director as the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra. They were looking for a conductor with connections to the Pacific or from a Pacific or Pacific Rim country. With Australia, I always say Australia is like a very, very distant neighbour island to Hawaii. They saw the work I was doing there over COVID and helping open the country back up in Australia. They invited me over to do some guest conducting. We got along very well. I came back again for another little guest stint, and then they offered me the job. My wife and I moved here in mid-2023, two of us. Then a couple of months later, we had a son, our first child. So there's three of us, and he's a little local kid.
What are qualities that make the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra special for you to have moved here to Honolulu from your home country of Australia?
Yeah, I've conducted a lot of orchestras and a lot of continents. There's two continents in which I haven't conducted yet. That's Africa and South America. The rest of the places I've conducted in. HSO, the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra, is really special. When I first got here, it's a really open and welcoming atmosphere and attitude that comes from the orchestra. It's kind of like our people are here, really. And that somehow seeps into the music making. We have all this music that is handed down to us from Europe, Beethoven and Brahms and Mozart and Bach and Mahler, whoever. It's music that is from Europe. Actually, I would contend that something like Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, all that stuff, it belongs to all human beings. But then to have these musicians who've chosen to make Hawaii their home, they don't just play music here in concerts, they live here, they teach all of our keiki how to play music. And so they bring this really open attitude. And so you'll see when we do concerts, we pair stuff like Mozart or Beethoven or Brahms with Hawaii composers, with composers from around the Asia Pacific. So it just kind of contextualizes everything that we do. So we're really an orchestra for its place.
This is Hawaii Matters. You just heard from conductor, musical, and artistic director with Hawaii Symphony Orchestra, Dane Lam. I'm your host, Kathy with a K. We're learning about the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra, and for some folks, small kid time, going on field trips to the Blaisdell Concert Hall, and now that's also at the Hawaii Theater. It was the Honolulu Symphony Orchestra. That's the heritage. 1900, it began. It was birthed in our islands, and it has continued to evolve. How has the symphony orchestra been able to sustain hundreds of years, even in our islands? What do you think makes it so?
I think it's a really human activity, and that seems like a really obvious thing to say, but I often draw the comparison to if we were being observed from outer space by an alien civilization, and they looked down onto the stage of an orchestral performance and they saw people drawing horsehair over strings in these little wooden tubes, and people blowing through tubes of brass that's wound around, and watching some weird guy up the front wave a little stick around. It would look so bizarre. And yet somehow this is the orchestra, the symphony orchestra as an entity, as a concept, I think is one of the great inventions of all of human civilization, really. It seems really obvious, and I'm sure a lot of people know, but I do come across a lot of people who are not aware. There are no microphones used with an orchestra, and so when people come into the hall, they feel these vibrations, this wave of sound that's created by human beings on stage that comes out into the audience where you're sitting probably shoulder to shoulder with other human beings. Maybe you know them, maybe you don't. And so this is a really communal experience that is, you don't really get very many places, this communal, acoustical, non-amplified experience. And it's really special. And until you've experienced that feeling, it's a physical sensation when this sound hits you from a direction. It's not just from a microphone. This is a sound created by a human being that carrying the thoughts and the sentiments and the feelings and the highs and the lows and the heartbreaks of composers, of other human beings, maybe who lived 100, 200, 300 years ago, somehow connects us all. And it's a very, very special thing. I think that's why orchestras have endured for so long.
As you're describing how an orchestra performs without amplification, it's a reminder that the reason why there are so many people that populate a symphonic orchestra is back in the day, there was no nothing to plug in.
Yeah.
Pre-Dylan, when that was such a such a thing, when he went electric, and it just continues to use the same person-made instruments, and that's incredible. Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah, it's pretty countercultural. Yeah. It's there are so many jobs that are under threat from AI, and maybe this is going to come back to bite me, but I feel pretty safe. It's really hard to replace musicians, conductors, composers with AI. It's not there yet. Maybe with electronic music, but acoustical music is really hard to replicate.
I got chicken skin when you're talking about that. Dane Lam, explain what a conductor is doing in front of an orchestra and how those movements are interpreted or executed by each section, each individual in an orchestra.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Kathy, and this is probably the most common question I get in the back of a taxi. So I've thought about it a lot. I suppose it's worth noting that a great professional orchestra like the Hawaii Symphony can play a lot without a conductor. They don't need a conductor to play something like a Mozart symphony together. But if you look at a piece of music, you'll see down the score there are instructions that are pretty arbitrary, like loud or soft or fast or slow. And so the first job of the conductor is way before you get to the rehearsal, way before you're around musicians. You sit at home, and you open this musical score and you look at it and you think, well, how fast is fast and how slow is slow? Now, if every one of the 80 musicians on stage did their interpretation of fast or slow or loud or soft, it would be chaotic. On top of that, a lot of musical scores just have loud written all down the page for every instrument. But of course, to make it coherent, to follow the musical conversation, you have to know which instruments to bring out and which instruments need to sit in accompaniment and support these leading voices. And it changes all the time. So you need somebody who has the full picture in front of them, not just the musical score, but the historical context, what else the composer was writing, what else was going on in the world at that time, what else was going in the country, what else was going on in the composer's own life. And so you come to rehearsal with a picture in your head. You want to imagine, you need to have a vivid oral imagination as a conductor. So you come with this ideal picture of what you think the music should sound like. Then you start the first rehearsal with all the musicians around, and something else comes out. Sometimes it's different to what you imagined, and sometimes it's better than what you imagined. So that's leadership as well, working how to incorporate what these incredible musicians on stage give you from their vast experience as well, and to create something coherent and something that's really moving. And in terms of the actual physical gestures of a conductor, if somebody came up to you in the street and held the flat of their palm to your face, what would you do?
Stop.
You would stop. You don't even think about that, right? You just know. It's an incredibly deeply ingrained reaction that you don't even have to think about what the gesture means. You just follow it. So conducting is not really codified. I mean, there's basic beat patterns of 4 or 3, and sort of generally agreed conventions. Like if you're big, people play more. You could show if something's a little soft or smooth. But what you want is people to be able to understand instantaneously without even reflecting upon what it means. So it's not like a code or something like that. It's using gesture to convey a musical idea or a musical point or a texture or a volume or an articulation. The Italians posit that they're quite good at conducting because Italians talk with their hands all the time. It's sort of an interesting comparison. And that's what you do in a rehearsal. You try to show how the music should be, show a tempo, show a sound, because of course, time is money. When you have that many people on stage, they're all, Olympians of the musical world. So many highly qualified and skilled individuals on stage. And it saves so much time if you can just show it with your gesture rather than speaking too much.
Dane Lam, artistic and musical director, as well as conductor with the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra. We are Hawaii Matters. I'm your host, Kathy with a K, learning more about the live musical experience. And if it's been a minute, treat yourself, friends and family, to myhso.org. Find out who's going to be coming through town. Who is or was the conductor or one musical composition that changed your understanding of the live symphony orchestra? Because you are a musician. Who inspired you to get into that lane?
Yeah, it's really interesting because generally conducting is something that musicians come to a little bit later because you need a background. You need a strong musical background. You need to have played instruments to a high standard. You have to have made music with other people. But I got into conducting really early because I went to this fantastic high school back in Brisbane, Australia. It was a public high school, but an incredible music program with really passionate teachers. And there were all kinds of different ensembles, orchestras, bands, big bands, jazz ensembles, percussion ensembles, string orchestras, choirs, everything. And so I was doing some different activity every morning and afternoon before and after school, making different kinds of music. And it was the first time I'd really been conscious of the role of a conductor. And these teachers, they were so passionate, and that really gave me the bug. They used to sometimes get senior students to conduct when they went out of the room or they had to go and do something. And I used to look at these senior students, I thought, they don't really get it, do they? They're not very good. And so one day when the teacher left the room, I just got up and decided to do it. That was it. I had caught the bug. And there was one of the mothers at school who knew I loved conducting. And so one day she was driving around on the freeway and she heard on the ABC, on our Classic FM, there was this course for school-aged conductors to learn about conducting with this visiting maestro from the United Kingdom, Christopher Seaman, who was an amazing conductor, conducted a lot of big groups, who was for a long time at the Rochester Philharmonic in New York State as the music director. And so she pulled over on the side of the road, phoned to get some more information, and then I started in this program and graduated as soon as I finished high school into the big program where you got significant time, podium time with the Australian Symphony Orchestras, the professional state symphony orchestras, under the guidance of their conductors. And it was a really unparalleled program at the time. I mean, it would have cost hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. But the Australian government at that time had made a decision through the Australia Council that funds the arts to create a new generation of Australian conductors. So I often say learning to conduct with these great professional orchestras who were so sensitive to every little nuance of gesture is like learning to drive in a Maserati as opposed to a Ford Falcon.
What is a misconception about going to the symphony?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. I think that some people think that the symphony's not for me, that orchestral music isn't for me for various reasons. I think some people are a little apprehensive. What do I wear? Will I know how to behave? Will I know where to clap? But I have to say, if people come along to Hawaii Symphony Orchestra, you can wear a cocktail dress or you can wear shorts and slippers. It's all fine.
Right.
What's most important is that you're there to receive the music. A lot of people think that you need some kind of background information, some prior knowledge. But in fact, you can just receive the music where you are, you come to it on your own terms. What is a beautiful thing about most symphonic music is that it doesn't have words. There are no lyrics. Of course, we do some pieces of music where there is a singer and there are some lyrics, but generally it is abstract. There is no words. There's nothing to tell you what to think or how to feel, and so you can receive it on your own terms. But I suppose the most delicious thing about music like this is that it has stood the test of time. You know, when Beethoven was writing his symphonies, there are a lot of other composers around who we've never heard of today. History does a good job of weeding out the stuff that's probably not so exciting. So the great thing about this music is that it is so wonderful. I kind of relate it to an analog of a beautiful home-cooked meal with beautiful local ingredients, really high-quality ingredients that has taken the time to all coalesce and come together. There's something very rewarding about it. And of course, the more you put in, the more you get from it. But coming for the first time is like a road to Damascus moment for a lot of people that I talk to. And it's so moving when I get to hear how people remembered things in their life or they feel something that they haven't felt permission to feel for such a long time. Because in this world we live in today, we're running from one thing to the other to the other. There's very little time and capacity and room and space to feel emotions. And suddenly you come into this concert hall. It's quiet, it's a little dark. The pieces go for a while in general, you know, it's not a 4-minute song, you know, generally some are, but generally you have the time to kind of sit and reflect, and there's something really countercultural about that today. And it helps you to feel feelings that we often just damp down in everyday life. And I think that's beautiful.
Dane Lam, can you talk about the different sections of the current Hawaii Symphony Orchestra? And what do orchestral members call themselves?
I think they just call themselves musicians. Okay. It's a fantastic orchestra. I'm very proud of how everyone has come together. Because as I alluded to before, these people live here in Hawaii. They've chosen to live here. There's not a lot else around here. So it is a real decision to live here. I mean, it's not that hard to live here, I have to say. It's very beautiful going to the beach every day, although it is a strange thing sometimes driving to rehearsal at around 7 p.m. and you can see people sitting by the water having their Mai Tais or whatever, and we're going to work. But it is a wonderful place to work. And we've had musicians, some of our musicians have been here getting on to 50 years. So that is real commitment to the cause, to the art form. And these people do it because they love it. They put in tens of thousands of hours to master their instruments. You think about it in the context of sport or people who go to the Olympics, you know, they spend, again, tens of thousands of hours. And then you get 80 of those individuals and you put them all together on stage. And it's something extraordinary. It is a very resource-intensive endeavor as well, but it's something that's worth so much to a community. And I think that's why orchestras have always been supported since their inception a few hundred years ago by kings or queens or governments or individuals. I mean, funding structures differ depending on where you are in the world and what time is in history. But orchestras have always survived because they offer something to the community.
Working musicians. Can you share on the local heritage of the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra in our islands? Touched upon it a little bit early on, but what have you learned?
Well, we can trace our origins, as you said, back to about the year 1900. So there's been a symphony orchestra in Hawaii for about 125 years. It's one of the oldest orchestras in the United States. What I've learnt about this orchestra is that it's always been an intrinsic part of the cultural life of these islands. I talked to some of the members who've been in the symphony for quite a while, and they talk about Hurricane Iniki coming to Kauai.
Yes.
And the orchestra flew out there just in the wake of this disaster. There was a lot of sentiment in the orchestra at the time that, well, why are we going? Why are we going? These people need food, they need water, they need shelter. But they went. They still went, and they just came to Kauai, set up, and played, and the whole community gathered around. And it was this real moment of catharsis that people were there crying, being together, being united by the music. And that's when they found out, this is why we do it. This is music, this is art that feeds our soul. It's not just an optional extra in society. I would say having a functioning high-level symphony orchestra is just as important as having good hospitals, good schools, good roads. And that's why it deserves to be supported.
This is Hawaii Matters. I'm your host, Kathy with a K. We're talking with musical artistic director as well as conductor Dane Lam with the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra. Now, folks can buy tickets to enjoy an evening of live music with the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra. What other ways can someone support myhso.org?
Yeah, I mean, what we really want is for as many people to be in the audience as possible. Mm-hmm. That is the primary way of supporting. You should tell your friends, you should tell your family, you should tell your enemies to come and enjoy the music. Of course, after a few dates, if you really like us, you can really take the plunge and we can get engaged and you can become a subscriber. That means you have your pick of concerts throughout the year. You can mark them on your calendar and have something to look forward to every month from the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra. And then, of course, the next level of support is through a donation that enables us to keep the music not just coming to our concert stages, but our concerts in schools, our free concerts in parks, our concerts on the neighbor islands, everything that comes together. You know, we have Masterworks concerts. We do films in concert. We do Hapa Symphony with some of our fantastic Hawaiian recording artists. We do stuff for the keiki. A donation really helps it keep going on, because I said to have 80 highly qualified artists on stage, and we're so grateful for all the support we get in the community. So many people give so generously. It's all tax deductible, I have to say. Every great city in the world has a great university, has a great art museum, and has a great symphony orchestra. And that's something that we should be very proud of and that we should always be very vigilant in protecting.
What are your recommendations for newcomers to the live symphony experience? You talked about general etiquette where you can be board shorts and slippers. Wear a shirt, please, or if you want to dress up. But are there any other ways that folks can feel even more welcome, because they are welcome?
They're so welcome. Before all of our Masterworks concerts, we do a pre-concert talk. I sit with Michael Thomas Fumai, who's our composer in residence, sometimes with our guest artists, and we just talk about the music. We just kind of unpack it a little bit to give people little hooks for what they can listen for, just to demystify a little bit. And that's an hour before our Masterworks concerts in the theatre. It's free and people can just come along. We also do a talk story with musicians in the intermission. And so we just come to the front of the stage or out into the foyer. People can just come up and talk to us, ask us questions, any question. There are no stupid questions. I also talk from the stage. It's really important to give people little pathways into the music, whether you're a seasoned concert goer or you're there for the first time. There's a lot of ways for people to get into the music. What's something that is really wonderful and unusual about, say, symphonic music? Every performance is different. So if you got the time, when you're driving to work or when you're going to sleep at night, have a listen in advance to the piece that you might hear at our concert, because the most wonderful thing is that you realize that the experience you have in the concert is totally different to any recorded music. It could be a different length, there could be different instruments coming out, and it's this live experience. Nothing can beat the live experience. We all got so used, me included, we got so used to sitting at home over COVID and just watching Netflix. And it is a chore to go out sometimes now. I think orchestras have found that, and theatre companies and ballet companies and opera companies have found that all over the world since COVID. It is harder to convince people to leave their Netflix at home and come out. But the rewards are manifold when you actually get there into this concert hall with other humans, witnessing and feeling other humans making music.
A lot of folks don't even realize that they've been enjoying orchestral pieces because going to the movies, actually during the holidays, Hawaii Symphony Orchestra had Home Alone that featured, and Harry Potter last season. But yeah, it's just like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, The Mandalorian. And I did a little research, like even West Side Story, that people think it's like a straight musical, but the score and the epicness, and we could go on and on and on. So if you're already enjoying these pieces, myhso.org, and that's something to even share with loved ones who you might be geeking out on certain films and TV shows. Do you have any favorite pieces or composers that you suggest we're going to do this season?
Mahler in general, he was a composer that came through at the very end of the 19th into the 20th century. As the world was undergoing such change, as the whole social order was being interrupted just before the First World War and then, of course, the Second World War, how much did the world change in the 20th century? It changed a lot. And artists and composers and writers and psychology, it was the time of Sigmund Freud. They were experimenting with this overt emotionalism in their art. So I always say Mahler is the first emo composer. He absolutely wears his heart on his sleeve. It goes from high to low. There's no kind of aloofness or kind of trying to be classy about Mahler. He really wears his heart on his sleeve. And I find when people come to Mahler, they feel it immediately. It's an immediate emotional connection. Like the Ninth Symphony. It sounds a little glib, but it's true. What would you do if you just lost your first child, your marriage was on the rocks, you lost your dream job and you had to go to a new country? Well, that's what Mahler had to do. And that all comes out. Sometimes, not all of us, thankfully, have had to go through all of those things. That there's a lot of consolation and solidarity to be drawn from experiencing the art of individuals throughout history who have gone through that and realizing that they're not that much different from us.
Who are a few of the guests or themes that we can look forward to in the 2026 Hawaii Symphony Orchestra season?
Well, we've got an amazing festival coming up, building on the success of our Beethoven Festival in 2025. 2026 is a Shakespeare Festival. There's going to be 3 main concerts at the centerpiece of that. The first one is a collaboration with the beloved Manoa Valley Theatre, and we're doing the Shakespeare Midsummer Night's Dream with Mendelssohn's incidental music that he wrote for it. Now, I've performed this Mendelssohn several times, but never actually with actors. It's pretty rare to get the Mendelssohn score with the Shakespeare text with a live theatre group, and we're going to be doing all that together. And you mentioned before that people will recognise things, recognise melodies at hand. So this Mendelssohn Shakespeare Midsummer Night's Dream, it actually has the famous wedding march, yam dim da dim dum dim dum da.
Yeah.
That's where it comes from. It comes from the Midsummer Night's Dream that Mendelssohn wrote. So there's all these little hooks that people can remember. We're doing a Tchaikovsky Romeo and Juliet with Ballet Hawaii. We're doing a Prokofiev Romeo and Juliet. So this Shakespeare is all part of Honolulu in March. I'm also really excited in June to welcome Renee Fleming. Now, Renee Fleming is one of the great singers of the world.
Yeah, iconic, yes.
Yeah. I'm really proud that we managed to attract her to come here to Hawaii, and so she's going to come in March. I mean, she's one of the great singers of the last 50 years to come out of this, or any country, really. she's sharing with us one of her real passion projects, which is all around conservation and the environment. So there's going to be graphics as well from National Geographic. It's a collaboration between Renee and National Geographic. Visual stimulus, there's the emotional stimulus of the music, and there's this incredible singing from one of the great singers of our time. We're also doing a celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Hokulea by our composer in residence, Michael Thomas Fumai, who was born and raised and educated here in Hawaii. And this is his kind of magnum opus in a way. It's a huge choral symphony. So big orchestra, big choir, there are visuals, there are projections of that voyage of the Hokulea. English, it's in Hawaiian, it uses all of our forces, but to tell a story that can really only be told here. You won't get this anywhere else in the world, and that's going to be a fantastic concert as well.
Thank you, conductor, artistic and musical director Dane Lam of Hawaii Symphony Orchestra. For the website for subscription to gift others, find out how you can also sponsor a musician and so much more, myhso.org. To share or replay this episode, search Hawaii Matters where you stream podcasts for Pacific Media Group. I'm Kathy with a K. Mahalo.